good.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah, all the things this month, Festivus, whatever. That's one of my favorites, by the way. This is me on the internet. I'm Bret. This is my channel. If you haven't been here before, this is normally what we do on Thursdays. We're YouTube Live every Thursdays. It's me and guests, and we're just going to get to it. Enough of talking about all of my other stuff going on. This week is a special year-end wrap-up, and for the second or third year in a row, I've got my special guests. We've got Laura Tacho there next to me. I'm not going to say left and right because I constantly get that confused when everything's reversed. And then I have Nirmal Mehta. Welcome.
Hey, Bret.
Hello.
So Laura is an engineering leadership coach, and I'm sure later we'll talk about a little bit about her coaching program that you can get into if you're an engineering leader or a team leader or whatever. And Nirmal is now at AWS. He's a principal, let me look this up, principal specialist solutions architect at AWS.
That's correct.
And
you got it right, Bret.
That's fancy.
And we were both at KubeCon,
soup.
and he is definitely a specialist. He's definitely principal, and he was killing it at the AWS booth with all the demos. So
awesome.
All right, so we're going to jump right in. So the goal of this show is not just for the three of us to hang out, because we're all Docker captains that knew each other from, 6 years ago, something like that, a long time ago. But we're here to take your questions about the topics at hand, which is basically, let's wrap up tech, but specifically DevOps for the year, and maybe things that were important to us or things that we think are relevant that we maybe have discussed on this show or in previous podcasts. These two fine people added some topics. I added a whole bunch last minute. So a lot of this is actually unscripted, and we're just going to kind of get our take on it. The first one, I just want to get it out of the way, because I think it only came to me when I started listing all these GUIs, which is, I feel like it's the year of desktop GUIs for container dev and cloud native management. It seems silly, like, okay, so what? But this year we have Docker desktop extensions, which is amazing. I think it's probably the best feature of Docker desktop all year. Have you all tried any of the extensions?
I've tried the Portainer one, and it's awesome.
Which is actually the most popular one, actually. I was going to tell you.
Oh, I didn't know
surprise.
that.
It has like 4 times more
sense.
installs than the next third party extension. It has more, like 4 times more installs than anything else. So Portainer is the winner of the extensions race for 2022.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of room for exploration there, but I really like the extension model for sure.
Yeah, I think it's kind of made Docker desktop GUI. I mean, obviously it makes it more useful, but for those of us that were diehard CLI fans, like the three of us all started Docker when there was no GUI. I mean, we had Kitematic, but we didn't really use that, right? We're using the command line. And we got this new GUI a couple of years ago. Docker started investing more and more into it. And I feel like a lot of us weren't paying attention because it was just, we're like, okay, it can do some of what I can do with the command line, but we all already know the command line. And now I feel like, okay, finally extensions is the reason to jump into the GUI. By the way, we had a show on that this year. Docker came on the show. We showed off a bunch of extensions. Portainer came on the show. We showed off their extension. Slim AI came on the show. We showed off their extension. Trivy, I think Sneak. They were all on the show this year. It seemed like all showing off their stuff. And yeah, Portainer is like 24,000 installs in 6 months or something.
Cool.
Slim, I think Trivy was the next most popular one. But then we have Rancher Desktop, Podman Desktop, which I just learned about. Eric Smalling, I don't know if he's around on the chat today, but Eric Smalling of Sneak pointed out to me Podman Desktop, which now Rancher Desktop, Podman Desktop, and Docker Desktop basically all do the same thing. They install Docker or a similar tool. They install Kubernetes. They let you, and now even the Podman one actually lets you use Docker extensions, which crazy combination of technologies there. But we have Lens. I think a lot of you on the chat probably know Lens for Kubernetes, run by Mirantis. But that has now gone to a paid model. So they actually have paid cloud features. And they have now, in case you're curious, there's an open source version called OpenLens, in case you don't want to use the paid model. We have the K9s, which people love to point out to me. All the command line heroes there love to point out K9s for its
I use that
shell
a
GUI.
lot in in my demos. Just
I think I
to
saw you
kind
do
of,
that demo.
I think I used it when I came back when I was on your show earlier this year. I had K9s up for the Carpenter demo because it's like really quick to see what's going on and like have a good representation of what's happening on your cluster. And then there's like another one. I just added to our notes here, but it's called KUI, KUI, and that's a graphic desktop client or GUI that's on top of a Kubernetes TUI, if you will. So you can put commands in, and then it graphically represents the output. I don't know how to better describe that than that. It's an awful description.
That's kind of cool. Yeah, Brett, can you throw it up? I want to see what that looks like.
It looks like it's made by engineers.
Yes, it's kind of like a Jupyter notebook meets Kubernetes, like TUI. is one way of describing it.
Nirmal, what are you using this for that you wouldn't use a different tool for?
Well, I wasn't aware that there was an open source version of K8's Lens. I was looking for alternates. But this is nice because it keeps a record of the commands. So you're basically running just like if you've used like Jupyter notebooks for like, data spelunking, if you will.
Stuff. Yeah.
Data stuff. It's the same kind of thing where you're putting in the commands and then you're getting like visual representation, like you can see the pods and you can see the YAML.
Got it.
But it's all interactive, which is nice at the same time. So
that's pretty cool.
I think one of the reasons I like K9 is you still have like the command line stuff in there a little bit. You're still putting the like the words in, and that's good to know just like what the resources you're trying to look for in Kubernetes, what the commands you're kind of running behind the scenes, because inevitably you'll end up having to run a command line kubectl command at some point. So, there's that.
Yeah.
All right. So GUIs, it's a thing.
It's
like,
definitely
go check them out.
GUIs are a thing.
I think it's a response to it's finally a good response to the gap between dev and operations with respect to Kubernetes. And I think the GUI, like the explosion of container and Kubernetes GUIs is a response to that need for that more dev oriented tooling for sure.
Well, and as we trickle down, right, as the laggards who maybe aren't the most elite Vim, Neo-Vim, TUI people, as they adopt all these tools too, because these are now, I consider, pretty IT mainstream. They're either going to have to use one of these or going to have to take my course.
Or both.
I think I think the bottom line on GUIs is like GUIs not just for people who don't know CLI anymore. Whereas before, it's kind of like when I think about a GUI for Git, it absolutely does not appeal to me because I learned this, you learn things on the command line and why would you ever switch? And for a long time, it was that way for Docker as well. But I think now we've reached that crescent where the GUI is actually adding something that the CLI can't. So it's worth checking out.
I try not to shame folks in terms of what approach they have to computers, because
totally,
I think information is like, we have all our senses, right? And there's some ways visual representation of data is more important, right? So we're going to be talking about potentially OpenTelemetry later and observability, and this will come up again there. But I think this is just, for folks that need a visual way of seeing what's going on in their cluster, and to operate it,
Yeah.
It's good. I think it's all good things for sure.
All good things. Good things. Yep. Brett, what's next on the list of good things?
I was telling people in chat. Oh, sorry, I was typing in chat. In real life conferences. So I want to just celebrate for a minute that we're actually. We did have technically a KubeCon last year, but it was in LA. I hear it was like 1,000 people. We've now had many, like a lot of the conferences that I'm aware of that didn't completely just go away forever are actually doing in real life stuff. And Nirmal and I got to go to KubeCon in North America a couple months ago. We're talking about we were all talking before the show about going to Amsterdam for KubeCon next year. I'm going to Civo Navigate in Florida in February and doing a couple of talks there on container security and stuff. So I feel like we're slowly getting there, but I feel like this was really the year. Like last year was a little too early. So I'm gonna call it the year of in real life conferences coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good to see folks for sure.
What's your
I didn't
next
make
one?
it to KubeCon.
You didn't, yeah.
Or no, I didn't make it to KubeCon. I didn't make it to reInvent either. Obviously, Nirmal was there, but I was at Lead Dev in London, which was actually that was my first conference since I remember canceling my plane ticket to KubeCon Amsterdam because I was a track chair and was really looking forward to it. And it was, what was that, August of 2020 or something. And yeah, I don't think I'll make it to KubeCon Amsterdam, unfortunately, but I'll be there eating cheese with you all in spirit and whatever else one does in Amsterdam. Probably a couple other things that the comment section can comment on.
It's mostly cheese. Let's be real.
Have a Gouda.
Some goed pass.
I learned about a whole bunch
Mostly
of cheeses
cheese.
while I was
Mostly
there,
cheese.
but I don't remember any of their names. So.
Yeah.
In fact, we had a separate
Pronounced
bag we came back.
Gouda. At least in German we say
Gouda?
Gouda.
Oh, Gouda.
Gouda.
And
Rhymes
now
with
that's
chowder.
why Netherlands and Germany are two different countries.
That's
Because
fair.
of
Yeah,
that
Nirmal,
word?
you're the authority here as well.
Yeah. Are we going to talk cheeses? I thought we were going to talk DevOps, but if we're going to talk cheese, my favorite cheese is slightly aged Gouda with fennel seeds, colloquially called pitcheskas.
I
And if
did
you
have
know,
that in Amsterdam.
you know.
The fennel. It was good.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
the cheese of my childhood. That's my happy place.
That sounds delicious. That can be our one cheese related comment, and now we can move on.
we checked that box. Cheeses, check. Next topic. I'm lumping a bunch of stuff here, but DevOps company boom and busts. So, I don't really have any busts on this list, like the demise of something other than Jenkins. It's part of the survey, but the survey, I was reading a survey recently, one of the larger ones. I can't even remember the company name, but it was one of like the CI companies or the security companies or something. And they said that of thousands of people they surveyed, Jenkins use was declining and GitHub Actions was rapidly increasing. So I look at that as like, I'm just going to correlate the two and say people, like I've been advocating for a couple of years now, like they're getting rid of Jenkins and going to a SaaS model where they don't have to maintain all the infrastructure and back it up and test restores and all that kind of stuff, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
You think Jenkins will actually ever all the way go away?
No.
Never. No. So as soon as you have a development team that is responsible for writing configurations for a particular tool, I think that the pain of switching is just so high that sure, I think and I think the rise of GitHub Actions is specifically with new projects at companies that already have a very robust Jenkins infrastructure. They're not bothering to put it on Jenkins. It's just like we're just going to use GitHub Actions and see how far that takes us, and then surprise, it actually takes you all the way there in a lot of cases. But yeah, Jenkins is here. Jenkins is here to stay. Jenkins is never going away.
Yeah, I think it's still the essence is that automation is the more important piece, and it doesn't, like, the tools used is aimed at friction, becoming more frictionless or less frictioned. Removing the friction from automated deployment processes is still the goal, and Jenkins still accomplishes that to a certain extent, right? But that's interesting. The other thing is GitHub Actions, a lot of like on the enterprise side, right? So a lot of places I've worked at in the past we're not allowed to use just like github.com or
Right.
third-party SaaS tools for that. So yeah, that's interesting. But
Yeah, offline or on-prem only. I did have someone in the course this week actually ask about. They said that they have infrastructure that doesn't have access to most things on the internet. The only exceptions are GitHub and GitLab. And so it was sort of like they didn't mention Docker Hub or anything else. They were just like, nope, just these two things. And that's sort of the the rise of those two products, GitHub and GitLab, as sort of the end all be all solution for so many things. And that's kind of like my. It's not even really a hot take, but the last couple of years, I've seen that there's a consolidation in CI. There's tons of vendors, tons of products, but people don't want 5 different CI. I'm going to say automation. People don't want 5 different automation engines for their code pipelines, and they want it as close to their code as possible with the same workflow for editing, changing, adding those workflows, and they want the status in their code. And that's why to me, like, even though GitHub Actions isn't as good in some cases as other more purpose-built CIs, or even like I know a lot of fans of Azure DevOps that love Azure DevOps and are not really ready for GitHub Actions yet. But I feel like that it being right next to your code, right where your developers live, and having that Actions panel right in the interface is like their biggest. Like, they don't have to be the best technically. If your code lives there, that's going to be your default. That's my take on it. So.
Yeah. I think we see that in the industry in general, where we have these periods of like specialization and purpose-built software that's very focused on one specific use case. And then we have this big consolidation movement where it's more important that just everything is sitting together. And then once we have those consolidated workflows, it becomes obvious that we have new use cases or new problems to solve, and then we end up fanning out into all this purpose-built software, and then the cycle just continues to repeat itself forever and ever into infinity. So next year we're going to be talking about the same thing, I'm sure, just with different tools.
Do we? Yeah. What do you want to call this theory that you just presented? Is it Laura's like rubber band theory of technology adoption? Or something like that.
I think that's it's my Laura's rubber band theory of market consolidation and technology adoption.
There we go.
It's a little long, but I'll come up with an acronym and then we can copyright it.
There we go. Great. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Everybody's got
to hear first.
I think that's a sign. I think that's a sign of health. I think the booms you've presented is like, I think all of this is a really good sign of health. I think this is like a healthy space for continued innovation. I think it gets easier and easier to start building like scaled out new technologies and new software and deploying it in all kinds of different environments, on the edge, in cloud, wherever, all the time. And I think we're seeing the ecosystem maturing, and also like creating that platform for continued innovation. And I know we're going to get to a topic around that a little bit later in this discussion, hopefully. But I think all these technologies like GitHub Actions and making it easier to consolidate your infrastructure as code, and all the artifacts and assets that are related to that unit of work in one place is key to organizational change with respect to DevOps, which is crucial. And it's also key to being able to scale whatever someone is working out on to great lengths that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I think some people can interpret all this movement as chaos, because it can feel very chaotic at times when you're in the middle of it. And I think other like web development areas such as front end also get that same bad rap of like, oh, there's always something new and shiny, things are changing all the time. But things are changing all the time because people are, they're moving up on the problem ladder, and they're having more problems to solve and different problems to solve that need more tools. So I think your point, Nirmal, about this is a sign of a healthy ecosystem is really true. If we didn't have more problems to solve, we wouldn't need the tools, and more problems to solve means that people are actually using the stuff. So,
And the pace of innovation is not slowing. So it's like if you want to be near the tip of the spear, you're going to be changing out all these tools on a constant basis. So, yeah.
So, what are some of the other trends that you saw?
Yeah. I wanted to, on the boom and bust real quick, I wanted to mention the three headlines that I put in, because we're talking about a lot of these same tools. GitLab, 70% year-over-year growth in revenue. HashiCorp, 52% year-over-year growth in revenue. Docker, thanks Laura for putting this one on there. Docker's triumphant rise from the ashes to go from nearly bankrupt to 100 million annual recurring revenue. So that number is not public. I'm not sure if you saw the Cube interview, if that's where it was mentioned. But
yeah, I saw it on Twitter actually. So I was like, oh, I need to do a little due diligence, but I saw like someone wrote an article on it, and I think it was all over Twitter as well. So I don't know if that's the right number or a public number, but even if it's not the right one, I think that we've all been with Docker the whole ride, right? We were there when it was the unicorniest unicorn to ever unicorn, and then kind of watching how difficult it was to come up with a sustainable business model for an open source tech company. But now I'm really impressed with just like the grit that it took to get that company back to a really healthy state, and also back to the kind of that initial vision of developer tools and really there for developer community. I think that's I'm so happy to see it.
Right. Yeah, there was plenty of times they could have sold, they could have folded, they could have, they would have sold the assets to some other company, Microsoft. Totally. We all joke about how they, rumor was Microsoft offered them a lot of money long ago when they were overvalued, and they turned it down. Nobody knows if that's true, at least on the outside. And I'm glad they didn't become a footnote in some other company, and that they are, some other giant dominant force, and that they are still doing their own thing. I think we're not going to talk about Swarm today. I know we're going to have people in chat ask about Swarm. That was actually last week. We actually had a show all last week that was the year in review for Docker. So if you're interested in that, go back in this channel to last week's show. But yeah, other trends. So to Nirmal's point, developer and DevOps trends. So I actually found a great article. These are all linked in a Google Doc that sadly I did not make it ready for public, but we'll put this in the show notes for the podcast. So those of you who want to listen to this,
you're getting a behind the scenes look right now.
Yeah.
The Dora. So an interesting thing was surprisingly broad adoption. This is from the Dora report, Google's Dora 2022. Surprisingly broad adoption of newer and emerging security concepts of practices. In fact, a majority of respondents reported at minimum some level of adoption of every practice the Dora team asked about. So maybe DevOps is...
DevOps has made it? Is that what we're saying?
We're done.
We're done.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think this one here, though, like the DevOps Institute on theirs, they interviewed or they asked a bunch of people... like usual, the thousands of respondents or whatever, what are the most important skills that those people consider for today and the future in IT? And number one was security, which that's usually, at least in my worldview, usually not top priority. It's usually it's only there when it's mandated by some other forces sometimes. Cloud. So for those that are asking about DevOps and on their journey to learning DevOps or getting into SRE or whatever, the top five, if you're listening to this, is security, cloud platforms, container orchestration, architecture, and then application technologies, whatever that means. Like maybe serverless or something, I guess. But
interesting. So I'm not surprised by the security. I think the cybersecurity incidents of this past year, or let's say like last 2 years, a lot of them have gone way more mainstream than just in our bubbles. And also from like a public sector kind of point of view, there's been a concerted effort to revitalize the cybersecurity posture of the U.S. federal government for sure, but also all of its vendors. Um, Things like the CMMI and like the requirements for software bill of materials and proving that you have secure software supply chains. I think those things are becoming much more mainstream ideas or mandates, or I guess you could say like things that are important within like the DevOps community and the overall application development community, whether that's being dictated by policy or just because of like these major, you know, like the increase in cybercrime that's been happening over the last years, right? So
Yeah.
uh,
And vulnerabilities, right? The number of vulnerabilities every year has been
vulnerability,
Yeah.
just
yeah. So
steep incline.
you know, security is kind of like a infinite problem, right? And security in depth is important. So I think it's also a realization that security is important across all those other skills as well, right? It's like it used to be where you turned on like TLS like at the end of developing something, right? And you like, but nowadays like pretty much we've actually switched to more best practices early on, which I think is a good thing.
Right.
But one
Defaulting
has
to
to know how to deal with
TLS
that.
instead of
Yeah,
instead of it being an add-on.
yeah. Like
Yeah,
as an example.
the number of security podcasts we've had on this show, like this year, if there's one theme for the tools and the products, companies, startups, all be on this show every week for this year, like I'd say at least a third of them are security focused. We had ChainGuard on, we had Aqua Security on, just a ton of projects. We're gonna have Falco on next year, a security tool. Lots of eBPF talk, which we'll mention here in a minute about trends. Just so much of it. And if it's not a security only thing, there's certainly security topics within every tool that we've had on this show, right? So it's hard to escape it, and I love it because a lot of us have been just beating the drum, and people aren't necessarily hacked, or they're not aware they're hacked. So until they have horrible experiences, sometimes they're just not going to jump on the bandwagon until they just really until they get hacked, until their company's in the news or whatever. And that wasn't happening enough for enough people to really care. And I feel like if you watch sort of the Australian security guy that has the Have I Been Pwned site, Tony, I'm going to screw his name. Someone in the chat's going to remember his name. Have I Been Pwned? It's a website where you can go and you can put your email address in, and you get notifications whenever a public database with your information, like your email address, gets exposed. And the only thing you're giving them is your email address. And you can even type in a password, and they'll tell you whether that's in a database or not, and stuff like that. Yeah, Troy Hunt. Thank you, not
Troy
Tony.
Hunt.
I knew Eric would. Yeah, Troy Hunt. So if you're interested in security trends and security stuff, Troy Hunt, look it up. He's got courses. I think he's got podcasts, at least one. He's the kind of guy that's interviewed on TV for security. But just the pace at which I get those emails now and the alerts, I just, it's staggering. It's staggering, and it's hard to ignore. Anyway, we could have a whole show on security of 2022. But yeah, I think last thing I was going to say on that, by the way, was that I think one thing that's really helped is that we're now seeing more security stuff happen without us doing anything. So Dependabot is alerting you without, I think at most you have to click a button to enable it in GitHub. So it's warning you about vulnerabilities and updates. On AWS, for example, now, I did it this year or maybe last year. If you accidentally put an AWS auth key in GitHub, you get an email from AWS and a phone call and a text, which I got, saying you have just released one of your keys into the wild in open source on GitHub. So like there's these things happening that I did not set up. I didn't have to be a security expert. It's just telling me. And I think that's my hope is that's part of it. Like npm, I think when you do npm stuff now, it'll sometimes tell you, this is for Node.js community. It'll say you have so many packages out of date and this many vulnerabilities. Like you won't have to run the command; it will just tell you. So that's one of my. I feel like part of the trend is. Oh, and Docker Desktop now shows you vulnerabilities in all your images in the GUI by default. You don't have to go do anything. It will show you some of the flags, not everything, but it'll show you some stuff there as well. So I'm a fan of all that security by default.
Such a big difference when you don't have to go looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
Security by default is great.
So I think this is the round of rapid fire real quick. Let's we're going to go through Kubernetes and CNCF major happenings. Stop me if you have comments. I'm just going to try to get through a lot of them so we can get to some new topics.
The juicy stuff.
Kubernetes at KubeCon. So the KubeCon, obviously, there's a keynote every day. Lots of stuff in the keynote, product announcements. I didn't really want to talk too much about product announcements because there's thousands of them this year in the DevOps space. And the one that I wanted to call out though was GitOps. Flux and Argo both graduated the CNCF program, so I feel like GitOps has grown up. Like that's a sign that the two biggest tools in the ecosystem are now graduated. Which there's not graduated tools in every part of the ecosystem yet. So it's actually wild that GitOps is still a relatively new topic, but both of them have graduated, and it's probably a reason for that. But it's they probably wanted to focus on it. But
rapid adoption.
Yeah.
Rapid
adoption.
Yeah,
the logos are everywhere. When I go to any DevOps site, they have the Argo logo somewhere on that site. Like we support Argo. Like it's becoming a staple. By the way, I'm starting thanks to Laura pushing me, I am starting a course on Maven next month. And it's going to be about Argo and GitHub Actions for Kubernetes deployments. And so you can come and learn live with me for 2 short weeks of like 1.5 hours a day training. And that's going to be starting next month. Laura also has her own live course where she teaches not Kubernetes. You don't teach Kubernetes. You teach engineering leadership. Tell me what you teach.
I teach how to pick the right metrics to measure the performance of your engineering teams, and actually quite a big portion of that is DevOps metrics. So it's not totally, we do spend a fair amount of time talking about Kubernetes and Argo and tools like that. So if you are interested in learning how to measure impact of your teams and equipping your teams with the ability to make better data-driven decisions about what they work on, then come check out my course. You can go to my website. It's just lauratacho.com. Just like Bret Fisher. Are you .io or are you .com? I don't remember.
I'm BretFisher.com. Yeah. I got the .com, so I'm sticking with it. Same. Yeah, and that that's just the one of these. So we want to talk about OpenTelemetry, but first I'm going to go through the rapid fire of the other ones. WASM plus Docker. So WebAssembly in cloud native is a thing this year. I actually don't want us to talk about it because there's going to be a separate show that I'm going to have Nigel Poulton of Kubernetes, like the most popular Kubernetes book as far as I know. He's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks, and we're going to talk all about WebAssembly and why you should care about it in cloud native. Docker announced at KubeCon that they support WASM now, and it's essentially taking the WASM binaries, the WebAssembly binaries, making them run on servers, but wrapping them in the container workflow so that none of us have to create a separate deployment workflow for our WebAssembly apps. We can just put them in an image, the same commands, they run on the server with the same commands, and at the end of it, there's actually a shim in containerd that runs the WASM Edge binary to run your WebAssembly apps on servers for speed, security, smaller images. Anyway, we're going to do all that on a show in like 2 or 3 weeks, so come back for that on the Thursday. On here, we have one of the things I thought was security related, and I'm just going to mention it, we're going to move on. Slim AI at the KubeCon keynote announced that if you start with an image today, like the latest image of something on Docker Hub, if you started with that today versus doing that same thing 2 years ago, you would now have more CVEs in your images, more security vulnerabilities in the base image today. And they're using it as sort of an indicator of the rapid incline of vulnerabilities being announced and not yet fixed in the ecosystem. And they talked about how we're there's more vulnerabilities. We're fixing them maybe as fast as we always were, but there's so many more that we're not able to rapidly fix them faster. So we technically end up with less secure images today than we would have had 2 years ago. That to me was not a great statistic and trend. So I don't know what we're going to do about it as an industry, but I've had lots of shows on it this year. We had Wolfie from ChainGuard on the show. We had Slim AI for slimming down your images on the show. So go back in the episodes. I feel like I just keep repeating that. So OpenTelemetry, another trend of 2022. Let's talk about it.
So OpenTelemetry was and someone correct me if I'm wrong, was the second most popular open source project in the CNCF out next to Kubernetes, right? So Kubernetes is obviously the main one, but OpenTelemetry was the second most popular, which indicates how much attention observability is getting these days.
Right.
Prometheus being the third most popular. So both Laura and I had this on the list. Would love to get Laura's thoughts on OpenTelemetry and why do we think it's the second most popular?
Yeah, I really felt like this year, similar to like GUIs everywhere, I thought this was like OpenTelemetry everywhere. You know, I have been a big fan. Obviously, I'm a very big metrics person, so it was always something that I was keeping a pulse on. But I've just gotten more people bring it up in conversation. The announcement with Datadog, there's just been a lot of movement around it. And yeah, what is driving people to be so interested in it? I think, you know, I think of a couple of reasons. One is that we've gotten to a point of maturity where people can care about optimization and things. Because I think realistically, that's not always part of the, you know, first it's whatever, make it work, make it fast, then make it pretty, or whatever whatever order it goes into. But like make it work is always first. So you've got to cross some level of maturity. I think the other thing is like now I've noticed in general in the last 6 months, especially year, that there's just been such an emphasis on optimization and doing more with less. And I think this OpenTelemetry story also plays into that as well, where like we're not in a boom season right now. We're trying to really optimize what we do have, make it better, more efficient, cost less, have a smaller footprint, more efficient workflows for our teams, and you can do all of that with OpenTelemetry.
Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So
this is a good article.
I concur. Yeah. I agree. The thing that there's this quote, and I love it. It's that something better than perfection is standards, and to me, OpenTelemetry is like the embodiment of that. Which is, I think there was a proliferation, if you will, of observability tooling in the last decade aimed at the complex, dynamic, microservices-based distributed application architectures that we're deploying on the cloud now. And the old school Nagios based like observability. Yeah, Nagios, remember that? Based observability of infrastructure was not able to handle that anymore. And there's a hard pivot to adapting to these more dynamic application architectures, and that brought about a rise in the Datadogs, the Dynatraces, the New Relics, and all the observability tooling. And for every like legitimate business transaction or piece of data that's going through your environment, Kubernetes just by itself is a observability data generating machine. First and foremost, right? So all these pieces are generating tons of different types of observability data, metrics, events, logs, traces, or logs, and maybe your application is being traced. And I think people were wanting to optimize the observability data and also start to use different tools with different features to visualize and analyze that and alert off of that data. And that's what's driving the demand for a standard representation of that data and implementation of collecting that information that then can be, inputted and outputted, imported, exported to different visualization and analytics tools and learning tools. And it's really exciting to see that the major vendors have adopted OpenTelemetry standards. The log spec just went stable. So logs are going to be part of OpenTelemetry soon, in the near future. The community is looking at other types of observability data, like profiles, like think flame graphs, events, and I think it's very exciting to be able to fine tune and really get to tackle the gnarly problem that is observability on these dynamic architectures for sure. So I think that's what's really driving it and it's exciting to see the amazing work in the open around OpenTelemetry.
Mm-hmm.
So don't sleep on it, everyone. it's a thing.
Right.
Well, it's hot.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not just a checkbox of I did it. I did OpenTelemetry. Yeah, I love the standardization of all this stuff and being able to allow us to plug and play. That's so key. It always used to be you had to choose your ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. Like, are you on Datadog? Well, then you have to only do the things that Datadog can do. And are you on like Nagios or whatever, Splunk or whatever you have like that? You're locked in their walled garden. And I love the ideas that we could possibly start mixing and matching tools and whatnot if that's going to end up being what it's about. Carpenter. So we had a show on Carpenter this year.
Yeah,
Carpenter Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly mention we're seeing rapid adoption of the Carpenter open source project as a alternate to Cluster Autoscaler, and check it out. There's new versions coming out quite frequently, and one of the latest features is, and especially right now, we're seeing a lot of folks, back to Laura's point, looking at optimization, cost optimization, trying to look at how to get the most performance out of their existing infrastructure, how to scale up and scale down performantly. That scale down is very tricky at times. And so there's a lot of new features in Carpenter on no termination handling, consolidation of workloads and your Kubernetes infrastructure. I highly recommend, especially if you're on AWS EKS, to take a look at Carpenter for optimizing your infrastructure. But I think we're going to see more of a trend around these types of tools that are aimed at optimization for sure. Like you said, Laura, I think that's probably going to be the 2023 theme if I was forced to pick one.
Yeah, I agree. Optimization, I think, not just in terms of technical optimization, but I think I'm seeing such a push toward team optimization, working more efficiently in general, whether that's cost reduction in cloud services or getting more work done with the same amount of people.
Yeah,
that's like the trend of our career, getting more done with less people.
Yeah.
In fact, I did read some statistics in those surveys about everyone having serious staffing issue is like their number one reason why they can't become more agile or they can't adopt new things or increase automation. All those the reasons they were giving for all those things was we have we're missing a third of the people we need to do that, or we have for every position we only have 1/3 of them filled, and like crazy statistics that I was reading about just the lack of staff, which bodes well for those of us in this community and trying to keep up, because it means it's not going to be that hard for you to get a job. But it doesn't mean when you get that job you may not be able to do everything you want to do because you ain't got people to help you.
Yeah. Is this a good segue, Bret, into our discussion about AI taking our jobs? Because
yes,
I thought we were all going to be replaced by
How do you know I'm not a robot?
How do you? You know what, Nirmal?
Mm.
I've asked myself that since the day we met.
All right. So we're the great segue into our last segment. This is going to be like the rest of the show, basically. We just felt like there's so much going on in machine learning, AI, data platforms that we could easily do a whole show on this. But there's definitely something that happened this year. Obviously, none of this stuff is new, but it's like it's sort of approaching the zeitgeist peak, sort of average citizen awareness. Because I feel like between like we just had the ChatGPT release, and that of course is all over Twitter and the grams and everything else, like are all showing that stuff, and the image generation with what is it, Wally or whatever, or Dolly,
Dolly.
and
Yeah.
and
Dolly.
now yeah, and now we have the Stable Diffusion version 2 release. Like, these are now becoming apps and features in our apps all day long, and it's all backed up by all this AI, machine learning stuff, data platforms that we're all running, and the world is now actually seeing the output of that. So I feel like there's two topics for us to talk about. One is like the consumerization of all this tech we've all been experimenting with for a decade, and no one cared that there was machine learning behind Google features. It's now only when they can actually see it in an app and understand that it's a visual difference, or it's an AI talking with them in a generative AI or whatever. And there's that. And then there's those of us in DevOps that are now starting to see tools to help us do our jobs. Developers, DevOps, operators, whatever, all have tools. And that's one of the things I saw from KubeCon was the trend. I lost count of the number of companies that had AI somewhere on their expo hall marketing, right? It was like AI everywhere. Everyone's like, it's like at least 4 or 5 that I saw with a .ai domain. I actually made a big list of them here. Not that anyone's going to be able to see this necessarily, but Kubaya, Slim AI, Roost AI, Union AI, basically Kubeflow as a service, cost optimization stuff with Cast AI, Run AI for GPU orchestration. There's just a lot, and they're all running on these AI platforms. So let's talk about the DevOps stuff first, and then we can get to the fun stuff. Not that this isn't fun.
It's all fun, Bret.
But I have some gifts for you related to images. So have either one of you actually played around with anything claiming to be AI in the DevOps space? I haven't so much, other than Slim AI. And I feel like the word AI just kind of just means a feature. It's like, okay, it's smarter. It's making the decision better for me than I don't have to make.
So me and you did, I think we did the Copilot show together.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, Copilot.
A year and a half ago. I've used ChatGPT for some Kubernetes stuff just to kick the tires on it, and it was pretty good. But there was a comment around, I think I saw the Venn diagram. I'm going to misquote this, but it was like really good for like, autocomplete or something like that. But then in the middle of the Venn diagram was like really hard bugs that, if you don't know anything, you're never going to find.
Yeah.
So like this is the eternal problem, right? Like you need to know a certain amount of depth to know what you're looking at with respect to auto-generated content.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets really murky and tricky.
Yeah. I think the key here is that you still need to know if what was generated is appropriate or not. And that decision making is not being supplanted by a robot. So it's not that there's not a need for an intelligent human. It's just massively boosting productivity of a human. I'm very jaded, perhaps is the right word, but anytime I see AI mentioned like as a feature, I'm just like, based on whose definition? Because how many like if then statements do you need before it's AI, or how big does your data set need to be before it's AI, when before it was just like we're just analyzing data. And especially if you read how this is covered in, for example, publications like Harvard Business Review versus the New Stack, the threshold for what counts as AI is just like vastly different. So I'm always just a little skeptical. But yeah, Brett, this is such a great a great thing that you're showing about Scott Hanselman really advocating for the role of human beings. I think in short, it's like, well, where do you? Yes, you can use Chat GPT to like pull out stuff from Stack Overflow and make it easier so you don't have to spend a lot of time Googling or searching for what you were doing. But like, who do you think's writing all the content that the model is trained on? It's not another model. It's not just generating all of this stuff.
It's organic, homegrown bot farms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we're basically what we were watching here. If you're listening to the audio version, is that Scott Hanselman, legendary Microsoft engineer, is responding to people on TikTok. TikTok. You can tell I'm an X-Gen because I can't even say it, whatever that thing is. He's on TikTok, basically responding to people that are saying, "Well, this is amazing. I can do code. I can do all these things in ChatGPT. Stack Overflow's out. It's dead. It's going to be replaced." And his basically response is like you're saying. It's like these things. First, they're confidently wrong all the time. They're just as confident about their errors as they are about their correct form, and they're also, Stack Overflow is necessary so that you can generate the intelligence for the AI. So I think like Nirmal and I looked at a year and a half ago, these are going to be very useful tools that are going to help us all do more in our job faster. Mm-hmm. There are maybe very niche jobs where eventually, maybe in 5 years, maybe 10 years, AI can technically replace those jobs. But I still feel like really what it's doing is it's just allowing humans to scale better. And whether you're a writer, a blog writer, a friend of ours, Brian Christner, actually he used Jasper to generate a DevOps blog article and send it out to his team, not telling them that it was fully Jasper AI generated. And they all read it and said, "Yeah, it looks good." I looked at it and it was fine. It was fine, but I always find that these things are not very specific. Like they're very vague and hand wavy whenever there's like, if you ask it, say, explain DevOps or whatever, it's going to do it in a very hand wavy way. It's going to be like the Wikipedia first 3 lines of something, and it's not going to give you depth of insight or certainly not any hot takes or anything that's going to be a new idea, right? That's the problem, is that it's not really creating new ideas. We can argue about that the imagery is new ideas for the visual generation of images and stuff, but
now to circle
Brett,
the
can
loop.
You show us?
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead, Nirmal.
while you're showing the DevOps fever dream, to close the loop on why this relates to DevOps, not only are these tools starting to be used by developers for helping them, helping us scale our productivity, but these machine learning models are developed on tools like Kubernetes, in containers. And another big trend this past year has been data on Kubernetes, is like definitely a thing. So things like Kafka, Spark, Kubeflow, Ray. I think you have a whole other list of all the AI tools or the machine learning tools that you can run on Kubernetes. Let's not miss the forest for the trees with respect to that potential natural evolution for a lot of our jobs is going to be running machine learning workloads and data workloads on the using these tools. So that's the other aspect of this is it's going to be unavoidable from all directions, right? Both from like the abstraction interface new tool level, like ChatGPT, DALL-E, Copilot, but also the infrastructure tools that we're going to be optimizing for are going to be these types of workloads in the future.
Yeah.
Today and in the future.
And I think we'll see that too. Like you'll probably see that on this show as we have more episodes next year on AI companies, AI startups, AI projects, machine learn, running ML ops on Kubernetes. Like they have entire days at KubeCon now around AI and ML. So these are things that like we're going to be on both sides of it as DevOps people, right? We're going to be consuming it and also running it. So we thought we'd play a little fun game real quick to wrap this up. I used Stable Diffusion, technically Diffusion B on a Mac, to give us some images to end the day with. So the first one here, and we're going to have to throw in some music So this will get weirder as we go. The first one I asked it, DevOps of the future, and it generated this nice little image. Does not know how to spell DevOps or future. And that is not me. I didn't give it any image, but weirdly when I looked at it, I was like, is it drawing me? I don't know.
Close enough.
Anyway, yeah. I asked it, I said, a wood sailing ship flying through outer space with a giant helm. Because I was hoping to get something that was maybe good, like a logo for the show. But that's trippy.
Is cool.
That's pretty cool.
That's trippy.
It didn't know anything like Kubernetes or Docker. It didn't know any of that stuff. So I feel like that it would have been funner if it would have actually known some of these product names or something. All right, humans having fun on a podcast.
Oh, wow.
So I gave it our logo. I gave it our logo for the show for this week, and then
that's weird.
And then I actually told it. I basically, like, you can give it a mask, and I gave it the mask of our faces, and it replaced our bodies and faces. Here's another one. Here's another rendition of that same insanity. I said, on this one specifically, I said humans having fun on a podcast. Yeah. So.
Oh my God.
Wow. Wow.
Thanks for the nightmares, Bret.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Absolutely.
3 futuristic humanoid robots having fun on a podcast. So
there we go.
Maybe more accurate.
That's what we're going to look like in the future?
Yes, that's our robot overlords replacing us in this show.
2030, best of DevOps.
2030. And
I think this one is kind of cool though, because I think you can kind of tell which one is which.
Yes.
Like,
I never noticed that actually. Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the least nightmare-inducing one so far. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, you're better is relative. So this one's what I said for friends at conferences that look like puppets.
What? Why?
These all take about a minute to make. By the way, I gave it the photo for this. I gave it a photo of the 3 of us. Actually, it was Laura, myself, and my wife sitting at DockerCon, and it used that as the base image for that.
Yeah,
And finally, friends at a conference that look like clowns.
No. Why, Bret? Why?
This is
that
us.
That is giving me the, like, DockerCon Austin vibes with that color scheme.
Oh my.
They're kind of matching in their outfits too. Like, are all clowns blue shirts? Like,
I can't unsee this.
You can't unsee that. So maybe that's us next year. Maybe the 3 of us will meet at a conference and we'll recreate this photo.
There we go.
Or not.
Well,
what a way to end it, Bret.
Yeah.
What a way to end it.
I wanted to end on a bang.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. We will see you all. I will be back this next week. We are actually going to have Nginx on the show next week, talking about all the things Nginx and Kubernetes, all the ways you can run Nginx on Kubernetes. After that, we've also got, I'm having a high fivers for those of you in our Discord server right over there, devops.fan, 12,000 people. If you want to be a patron or a supporter, you get access to the monthly hangout. And we have a lot of fun. There's like a dozen of us that hang out for like an hour or so. We talk about DevOps topics, what we're working on. We get reviews from people. That's all happening next week. Join the Discord server to see more about that. And then later this month, we're also doing on a live stream, I think it's like around the end of the month, on WASM plus Docker and what that means for cloud native. So if you're hearing about WebAssembly, if your developer friends are asking you about WebAssembly and how you can deploy it for them, that's the show for you. We're going to talk more about that. And who knows, 2022 or 2023 is going to be a great year. So more AI, more ML ops, more everything automation.
Awesome.
All right. You know where to find us all, by the way, on the internet. I just realized we didn't have our Twitter handles below us like I was supposed to. But they are in the description. So thank you, Laura. Thank you, Nirmal, for being here. This has been a great show as always. And we will do this again next year, hopefully.
Thank you so much, Bret.
Thank you, Bret.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
See you
Laura.
soon.
Good to see you.
See ya.
Waiting for the outro. Let's all do a screenshot. Waving so I can do the